Welcome to the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, where we spend an hour each week exploring life-improving topics through a lens of alcohol recovery and the Sinclair Method. Every week, we take on a new question, topic, or common challenge to empower people to either build a better relationship with alcohol or to eliminate it completely. Episodes are filmed live on Twitch at twitch.tv/C3 Foundation, and the audience is encouraged to ask questions and engage with the host and guests. The Options Save Lives weekly stream is hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and is produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous sponsors. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org.
Hello, everyone. For those of you out there, can you hear me okay? We've been working through some technical difficulties probably for the last hour and a half. So how is the sound? Can you hear me? Andy man, can you hear me? I see you in the chat. Hello. Sound people? Feedback? Anybody? Okay, well, Danny, you and I can hear each other, so hopefully if they see my mouth moving and they're not hearing something, eventually someone will say so.
They'll let us know.
At least I can only hope. In any case, it's being recorded, so if they're not hearing me now, at least hopefully they'll hear the recording when I post it next week. So, okay, I see a yes in the chat. You guys can hear, so that is perfect. So thank you guys for tuning into the Options Save Lives weekly live stream. As always, I'm Jenny Williamson, Executive Director here at the C3 Foundation and your host for the next hour. I hope everybody is doing well and about ready to have a good weekend. We are broadcasting extremely low tech tonight from the hotel where we are exhibiting in Hollywood, Florida all weekend. And I'd love to hear where you guys are watching from. If you're a first timer to the stream, welcome. This week, we're going to talk about boredom and how to deal with it with TSM Coach Danni, who is joining us from Australia a day ahead of us, even on Saturday. So if you've ever asked yourself, okay, what'll I do with my time if I'm not drinking? Yeah, you're not alone. Lots of people drink alcohol because they're bored. A lot of people do a lot of things just because they're bored. But if you're on the Sinclair Method and your progress is stalled, it could be because that boredom is sabotaging your success. So hopefully by the time the hour's up, you'll find some tools you can use to effectively deal with boredom when it creeps up on you. So if you have any questions while we're talking, if you have any suggestions for beating boredom that have helped you, put those in the chat box so we can keep things interactive. And then before we jump directly in, let me properly introduce our guest tonight. Danni's decade of lived experience with AUD followed her life-transforming journey on TSM, and it's what led her to support others to their own success on this method. Through many years of personal and spiritual development, as well as a broad knowledge of holistic coaching, she has collated the best of what she's learned and applied and applied to create a toolbox of life skills to equip her clients with. She works on a peer-to-peer level as someone who has been there. She holds space for her clients with zero judgment. And Andy, yeah, you probably do have buffering issues, and I don't think it's you. I think it's our hotel Wi-Fi, and I do apologize for that. So Danni believes that shame and stigma can only survive in silence. During her coaching sessions, she teaches people to activate their voice to claim the fully expressed, liberated version of yourself that you long to be. Now, this doesn't mean your journey needs to be shared anywhere else, but when you see her for coaching, you should feel free to be seen and heard. Danni coaches with a dual approach to TSM. The first is the practical aspect, compliance with taking the medication. The second is a focus on enriching one's life with endorphin-producing activities that light them up. And then the two together create magic and transform lives. So, Danni, when we talk about, in really engaging somebody to being their best version of themselves, how does boredom factor into that? And what made you really want to talk about that tonight?
Yeah, well, as you said, Jenny, when reading out the bio, the dual approach, I think, is essential. Not only does it help accelerate one's journey on TSM, but it makes it more enjoyable. And I think that looking at the aspect of behavior change as well as the compliance with the medication is where all the gold lies. I think it's a real opportunity for people to recreate or redefine their identity, because if you've spent years, experiencing alcohol use disorder, then that's very much an ingrained part of our identity, and that needs to shift as our behavior shifts, or else that's going to be incongruent and not in alignment. So I think the behavior change piece is a really huge opportunity for people to start creating the life that they desire to step into. And boredom is definitely a big factor, because if you've spent years drinking, that's a lot of time spent. Not only the time spent whilst drinking, but the time that is wasted as a result of that the next day.
Yeah, and boredom is such a human condition. Boredom, we just constantly want to fill in that void.
Absolutely.
So how important is it, do you feel, to really stress that with people, that their boredom isn't necessarily because of their addiction, but just because they're human?
Absolutely, Jenny. I mean, in this day and age, we're all so busy running from one thing to the next and juggling a million balls at once. So we're actually not very accustomed to stillness. And that was something I also wanted to speak about today. As much as we're talking about busting boredom, I want to really reiterate to people the value in stillness as well, that we don't always have to be rushing to fill in that time. And I understand, AUD or not, as you said, that just our human condition, our nature is to want to be busy all the time. There's this almost need for distraction. But I would really encourage people, as uncomfortable as it can be to start with, to really embrace that stillness from time to time and expect the discomfort of it to begin with, because that's normal, as you've said, for anyone. But there is a real opportunity there. There's a lot of value in sitting with oneself and observing, and especially for someone who has experienced AUD, alcohol numbs us. So to be able to sit in stillness with ourselves really gives us an opportunity to feel the feelings and to really observe the thoughts that for years we might have been numb to.
And that is difficult. And as you mentioned, it can be very uncomfortable. And again, this is with or without addiction. I've heard from several sources that the average person, 80% of our internal dialogue is negative. So It seems very natural that we would want to do anything to stop from being in that moment stuck with nothing but our thoughts. So talk a little bit about how someone might be able to ease themselves into beginning to embrace that stillness, because with a lot of people, if you say the word meditation or mindfulness, they're, oh no, no, no. But yet it's so critical to our mental health to be able to acknowledge our own feelings, and it's very difficult and uncomfortable. So how does somebody start with that?
My suggestion would be to start really small with baby steps. So don't intend to sit and meditate or practice mindfulness for an hour the first time you go to do it. Try 5 minutes. That's still probably more than you would have been doing before, but it's enough to challenge you and to stretch you. And just be gentle with yourself. You know, if you go into it with the expectation that most people are going to find this practice uncomfortable to start with, this isn't me, it's not, you know, there's nothing wrong with me, I can expect to experience a bit of discomfort here, my mind's going to be racing, it's really hard to shut out the thoughts, so I'm just going to sit and just see what comes up for me without judgment. And I would, just really encourage people to start with 5 minutes a day. So just try it and just give yourself some grace and some patience with the process, and see after a week or a month how you're feeling. And you might find that 5 minutes of stillness is what helps keep you sane some days.
And that is, you know, and it really is a difficult thing. And we see with the Sinclair Method in general, how because it's not abstinence based, because it's not an all or nothing, people still have that all or nothing mindset, that I've got to jump in both feet first, and I've got to totally immerse, and if I don't succeed immediately, then I'm failing. So does boredom have anything to do with some of those thoughts? Are they similar or parallel to one another in trying to do it all or do nothing?
Yeah, I think it can play a part in that for sure. And, you know, people have habits associated with their drinking patterns. So I would really encourage people to give some conscious thought to how they're going to spend their time that they would ordinarily be drinking. So at the times that they would, you know, religiously or regularly drink, really giving some conscious thought ahead of time and planning, so that you're not coming home at 5 o'clock, for instance, and if that was the time that you would normally come home and crack a bottle of wine after a stressful day at work, rather than thinking, okay, tomorrow I'm going to have an alcohol-free day, and not really planning for what you're going to be doing in that time, kind of sets one up to fail, because then they get to that time and place where they're so ingrained and used to a particular habit that they become a bit idle, and there feels like there's a bit of a void to be filled. So I would really encourage people to set themselves up for success by having almost a strategy in place and planning a new ritual for that time and place that they would normally be engaging in the behavior that they're looking to reduce or remove.
So what I hear you saying, and this is something that I know Claudia has said, and many others, it sounds like you're saying that in order to break a habit, it's easier to replace it with something better. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, essentially. I think it's really important to have things to look forward to. And we know the value in engaging in endorphin producing activities, particularly on AF days or alcohol-free days. So having something to look forward to, and that is an endorphin producing activity, if we do that in place of the thing that we are trying to stop or reduce, you know, we're creating new neural pathways, and we're providing ourselves with positive experience that produce these endorphins. So that behavior is more likely to be repeated. And certainly, yes, it is an opportunity to replace a habit that isn't really working for us and isn't for our highest good with something that is more in alignment with where we're wanting to go.
And I don't think a lot of people really connect boredom to habits. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think people tend to see them as siloed and separate from each other. But I really love that you are talking about the two of them working in conjunction. So when somebody says, we've got somebody in our chat that said, boredom's my biggest problem. I need all the help I can get. So how do you go from talking to somebody who says, I have boredom as a problem? How do you narrow that down to action that they can take to do something about the boredom?
Well, I would start by suggesting perhaps creating a list of things that you're interested in, and then start sort of brainstorming from there how you can incorporate those things that maybe they're things you've been wanting to do for years that you've put off because you haven't had the time. Now suddenly you do, and you don't know what to do with it. So I would start by really exploring all the things that excite you. And it doesn't have to be anything productive or anything like that. It can be things that are simply for the joy or the fun of them. I would encourage people to think about maybe relationships that were neglected throughout the period that they were experiencing AED, and starting to maybe look at connecting with people again. And yeah, I think that really just exploring the things that excite you is a good place to start.
And how about activities or hobbies that were lost because of alcohol? You talk about how important it is to reclaim that part of your life.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of things that are important to people end up falling by the wayside, as alcohol begins to take priority. So there's definitely an opportunity for people who have had interests in the past and things they love that have ended up being neglected or pushed to the sidelines, that they can revisit and reintroduce, for sure. And then, of course, new things as well that have been put on the back burner, and now is the perfect opportunity to start exploring those things too.
And then I know we have a lot of family members and support systems, husbands, wives, who have a spouse who are on the Sinclair Method, and they're always looking for ways to support their loved one. So how does a significant other help someone approach dealing with boredom with the two of them?
Well, I think having an open dialogue is really important. So both spouses being on the same page and being honest and upfront about the fact that boredom is an issue, and getting your spouse on board with that, and maybe talking together about things you both enjoy, so that their activities, this is then an opportunity not only to explore old or new hobbies, but you can do that in conjunction with your partner as well. So yeah, I would say that that's almost like having an ally on your team, right? To be able to do these fun new things together. So I would see that as an opportunity. And another thing that I would encourage people to think about doing is in this, in that space of boredom, a great opportunity is to look at how you can maybe restructure your environment to set you up for success. Because again, if everything is kept in place the way it was throughout your period of AED, there's probably a lot of opportunity for change in your home environment, for instance. This is a really great opportunity to circulate energy by changing things around. So we're wanting to sort of break that familiarity. I know Claudia often talks about how if your thing was to pour a glass of red wine and sit on your favorite couch and watch a particular TV show at the same time each day, you're instilling that pattern. So the opposite is true as well. When we're looking to change something, it's an opportunity to change our environment, because we know how big a part environment plays.
And I think people overlook that a lot, because I think people can discount, oh, well, I'll sit on this chair. I'll move the couch to another side of the room. I'll sit in a different chair. I'll pour my wine in a different glass. And yet we've seen time and time again how those tiny things that can be written off as insignificant are actually very powerful.
Absolutely. For sure.
And then, so I know that there are people out there who are probably like this, that try to go so full throttle in busting their boredom that they actually become counterproductive by going the other way. For instance, I'm at this conference, so I'm here. I know I've got downtime, so I've got my laptop, I've got my phone, I've got my my notes, the things that I need to do for our upcoming conference. I brought my Kindle. I brought all of these things almost out of a fear that I would have a couple extra minutes too many and be bored. And I know that people do that on the Sinclair Method as well because they get hyper aware of it. So talk about how to create a balance between productively filling the time and learning to sit with it and deal with that discomfort until the discomfort is less discomforting.
Yeah, great question. Well, when we were speaking before about mindfulness or meditation, whatever term resonates best with someone, as I said, I would really recommend starting small. So acknowledge the fact that it's likely that you are going to be sort of scrambling for things to fill the time so that, you know, at all costs, you do not experience that boredom that we're always desperate to push away. That is normal. And as you said earlier, Jenny, that's normal for people without an addiction. So just acknowledge that that is the case. That is part of our human condition. But by simply wanting to introduce more stillness and presence with yourself, you know, your intention is there. And so I would start small, as I said before, 5-10 minutes a day, and just go from there. And I think that over time, as one learns to be more comfortable in their own company without any sort of outside distraction or busyness going on around them, that is going to become a practice that is part of their daily sort of self-care that they will really look forward to, some time out from the noise and the distraction. And I think that it's just a natural progression that as you sit in that discomfort and, as you said, it becomes less and less uncomfortable, you know, you're going to want to spend more time on those more still sort of practices where you can be present with yourself. And it might not be sitting there in silence the whole time. It might be that you want to pull out a beautiful journal and start writing down your thoughts as they come to you, or you might put on some relaxing meditation music in the background and just take some deep breaths, or do some yoga stretches and things like that. And I think that as you become more accustomed to those sort of practices where you're just present with yourself, it's a natural progression that you want to spend more time doing that, because it does really fill your cup up.
And I do think it is so important that people understand that it's okay that this is scary, because for a lot of people, the part of the reason they began drinking to begin with was to not have that company alone inside their head. And so I think it's really important that people know that it's not easy. And so if you're not good at it right away, that's okay. You can still get better.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And then with the other activities that you're looking to incorporate, when it is that period of sort of feeling like you need something to do to fill the time, I would just encourage people to be mindful of the way they're spending that time, because sometimes we can find ourselves endlessly scrolling on social media and hours go by, right? And that may be a way to fill in the time and be distracted, but how does it make you feel? So I'd really encourage people to be sort of checking in with themselves about whatever activity they're engaging in. How does this make me feel?
And that's wonderful, because one of the things that we talk about is the fact that with the Sinclair Method, your recovery is so much about improving your quality of life and your health overall. And
Absolutely.
so speak a bit about how learning to embrace the boredom at some point and to be with yourself centered. Talk a little bit about how that can eventually help someone move toward their ideal self that they want to be once they have succeeded at the Sinclair Method.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question, Jenny. As I said before, I think that spending time on redefining your identity when you're going through a recovery process is crucial, because again, if you've spent years identifying as someone who drinks 1-2 bottles plus a night, then that is no longer in alignment with who you're stepping into as you embark on this journey. So I think that this opportunity, this extra time and spaciousness and clarity of mind that this method gives us, rather than labeling it as boredom, if we can look at it as spaciousness. And within that, we have an opportunity to really redefine who it is that we want to be and who we're stepping into. So I would really encourage people to think about who is the person that I would most like to be? What is the highest version of myself that I want to step into? What do they look like? What do they dress like? How do they speak? How do they move in the world? How do they treat other people? What do they do in their spare time? That sort of thing. Getting a clear image in your mind of who that person is that you're wanting to step into. And then working back from there about what actions can I take to step into this new version of myself that I'm becoming. So I think that it's a really positive and powerful opportunity. And I think that it's a very important piece, because I don't think that we can really change our habits if we're stuck in an old identity.
And talk a little bit about how the need for patience with yourself, patience with the process, and a little bit of grace and latitude can help with that process, because we all know how much shame comes with addiction, and there's such a tendency to internalize those negatives, the things that you did in the past. So talk about how letting go of that and looking toward the future all plays a part in this.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a huge need, Jenny, for a lot of self-forgiveness, because there is so much shame associated with addiction, right? I think it's really important to acknowledge yourself for being on this journey at all, regardless of where you are on it, even if you haven't even started yet. The ability to acknowledge that something is an issue for you and to speak about it is massive. That takes huge bravery and courage. So I think really acknowledging oneself for that is incredibly important. And absolutely, self-forgiveness is huge as well. It's really important to acknowledge that in many instances you probably haven't shown up as the person that you wanted to be, while alcohol was in the driver's seat of your life. But there's not a lot to be gained from looking backwards. And we really need to look forwards and focus on where we're going. And I think that in terms of patience, people would, benefit it would benefit people to remind themselves that their AUD didn't develop overnight. It is progressive, and so is this method. And I've heard it said in the forums and on the Facebook pages and whatnot. I think Bruce Rose said it, that while TSM is not an overnight cure, it is a permanent cure, and it is worth sticking to. So I think people often, they feel like they haven't reached extinction yet. So they haven't reached their end goal, and they lose sight of the progress they've made. And if you've gone from, if you've reduced your drinking by 20, 30, 50%, that is massive. It might not be where you ultimately want to be, but that is absolutely huge. And if you think back to the person you were a few years before starting TSM, about whether that would have been possible for you, that wouldn't have been possible without this method. So really acknowledging the progress that you're making, regardless of whether it's where you ultimately want to be or not, I think is very, very important to this process.
And how important is remembering that, you know, we're all fallible human beings. You're not going to, you are most likely not going to be 100% perfect at all things TSM all the time. Your drinking is not going to reduce linearly. It's going to have its ups and downs. So talk about how those, focusing on those negative thoughts can then put you back into the habits and kind of the zone out for boredom that you then find yourself facing again, even though you have done great progress.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think if one is focusing on what they think is not working in the process or in their progress, that feeds into that shame piece again. And we start to feel like a failure. And it's those sort of thoughts that led us to drink in the first place. So as you said, just being really, I think it's a lot to do with education as well. And being aware of the fact that it is not a linear process and that your drinking isn't going to go one way like this, that there will be peaks and troughs and swings and roundabouts. If you know to expect that, and if you have a good support system in place, I think that makes it a lot better. And particularly when I say support system, there's various means and you know, a combination of all of them is probably the best. But in this particular instance, I'm really referring to peer groups. So like some of the Facebook pages, because these are other people that are on the method as well. So if you're feeling a bit, you know, discouraged with how your progress is going, those peer support pages they're invaluable for providing encouragement and for reminding you of what you need to be reminded of in the moment by other people who've been there. So I would really encourage people to get connected to those Facebook pages and to their peers. You know, there may not be people in your life that are doing this method that you can speak to, but we're lucky enough to have these communities online. And I think they play a crucial part in keeping you on track and reminding you of what you need to be reminded of in the moment.
And, you know, here's something that I don't know if I've heard anybody do, so I definitely want to ask you about, since the topic is boredom. What about building simply a community, a support community around you to do things, and whether that's virtual things and to just chat, whether it's gaming, whether it's go out on a walk, and talk about how those support systems, even if they're not centered on addiction, can help you with boredom?
Yeah, great question, Jenny. I think, as I was saying earlier, like one of the things that I would encourage people to do is look at the relationships that they want to work on. Often really important relationships get neglected whilst we're in the midst of addiction. So on the other side of that, while we're on our recovery journey, that's a great opportunity to reconnect with people that are really important to us. And I find that often, you know, whilst we're in the midst of addiction, you know, there's that saying about birds of a feather flock together. So this is an opportunity to really examine the relationships in our lives, because a lot of the time that we're spending with people whilst we're in addiction are likely to be with people that are engaging in the same sort of behaviour. And when you start to remove that, there may not be really very much else in common. So looking at the relationships that don't centre around alcohol, but that do have, you know, that connection, I think focusing on really building those positive relationships is really important. And then, as you said, building a community, whether it be online with the support groups or with people in your everyday life, is a fantastic opportunity to start building connections with people that have interests that are not centered around alcohol, and to do, you know, fun activities with, and to have someone that you can call and have support you is definitely huge.
And just in case anyone out there isn't aware, talk a little bit about the isolating effect that addiction can have to begin with, and why we're talking about building connections when we're talking about boredom in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, addiction can be extremely isolating because there is so much shame and stigma associated with it. It's funny, it's like a two-sided coin, right? Because part of the problem with alcohol is how widely accepted it is, right? Except when it's out of control. That part we keep secret and private, right? So we'll engage in the behavior with whoever's around because there's no shame in doing that. It's so acceptable and accessible. But the fact that it's become an issue for us, now that needs to be kept to myself. So those feelings of shame and those that experience of the addiction of it is very isolating because you're keeping it secret.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, because while most people who are on the Sinclair Method completely understand that, I know that we do have some people who either have not started yet or who are supporting others who watch and may not personally understand that. So thank you so much for talking about that. So what about, do you start with people by asking what alcohol took from them? Or do you start with who do you want to be when you're trying to address boredom?
I think it depends on the person, and both are great questions and both should be asked to everyone, I guess, because they're things everyone should consider. But yeah, absolutely. So having a look at what it's robbed someone of, and what removing it from the picture or reducing it, at least putting it in the background, what that then allows for them is really important. And then in terms of identity, yeah, who do you want to be, I think is a huge factor. But I think it depends on, like, as for where to start, I think it depends on what the motivating factor is for that individual person, because everyone comes to this method being driven by something different, and we've got to really drill down to what is driving you. Yeah,
Claudia calls that finding out the why.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's the why of why did you initially begin to drink, and why do you want to use the Sinclair Method to change that relationship with alcohol? So
yeah.
So what strategies can people use to continually go back to their why, to use that as a tool instead of just a one-time question that they answer? Talk a little bit about how to strategize that.
Yeah, I think talking about it with someone and getting really clear on what their why is, or why they're on this journey and this path of recovery, getting crystal clarity on their why is extremely important. Sharing it with those that are supporting them on the journey, so that when they're in that dialogue with their loved one or TSM buddy or coach, they can come back to that why, so that when they're feeling discouraged or disheartened, or maybe like the process isn't going as quickly as they would like, they can always anchor back into that reason. But it starts with being really clear on what it is. And then, it depends on the person. We all work differently. If you're a visual person, you might make it into a sign that you stick on your mirror in the bathroom that you see every morning. And, you have it maybe on your desk, so that there's that constant visual reminder. Whatever works for you, or you might say, like, let your accountability partner know and ask them to remind you of that, send you a text every second day or so. So I think it's just finding out what works for you, but starting by getting really really clear on what it is, and then remembering that in those moments of self-doubt or discouragement, that to remind yourself of that why, and anchor back into the real reason for why you're doing this.
And why is that something that is so difficult for people to come back to?
Because addiction takes such a part of our brain capacity, right? And in the heat of the moment, when you're caught in a craving, that seems to be what just takes over, right? But along the process of this journey, as we start to get better at acknowledging cravings and catching them and dealing with them before just going on autopilot and engaging in the behavior, if we can remind ourselves of that why, that's going to really help to sort of intercept that craving action response.
It sounds almost like it's a mental version of a muscle memory, which again is something that you build and train. So talk about that parallel.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great analogy. It's exactly like that. And yeah, with practice, as it would be with using a physical muscle, it's going to get stronger. And it's going to become a more automatic action rather than such a conscious effort to do. So I think just having patience in that process and knowing that the more you do it, the stronger that muscle is becoming and the more automatic that behavior is becoming. And eventually, I mean, that's the goal, right? That cravings no longer overcrowd our judgment and we're the one in control of them.
Exactly, because again, it's human nature that when in a stressful position, when you feel like your back's against the wall, when you feel like things are just overwhelming, we just tend as humans to revert back to the most comfortable automatic thing. And addiction is no different. It's just more dangerous.
Yes.
And so I know I get frustrated when I hear professionals try to blame everything on a person's addiction, as though they're, and they pile the shame on and say, oh, well, that person is doing that because of their addiction. And it's like, no, they're human. And all humans do things like that. It's just that this is with alcohol. I think that one of the things that came up during the conference today was one of the providers that stopped for more information was talking about the need for empathy. And empathy is such a... We think about empathy in terms of empathy for others. But, as we're running out of time here, talk just a little bit about how empathy for yourself and talking to yourself the way you would maybe your best friend if they were in a similar situation. Talk about how that is helpful to not just the process of the Sinclair Method, but also changing those habits and dealing with boredom.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jenny. Empathy is crucial, and I think that it takes a shift in perception for us to be able to show ourselves empathy, because of course if we look at the narrative about addiction, there's so much that suggests that it's the person's fault and they're being weak-willed, that it's some character flaw. There's not that acknowledgement of the disease of the brain, right? So I think that learning about what addiction really is and reading the literature and the science and understanding what it is, and that it's not a reflection of you being an immoral, weak-willed person, is crucial to being able to show yourself empathy and actually understanding that if this were any other disease, you would be met with sympathy and compassion by others and yourself. You would feel sorry for yourself. And you would automatically show yourself that empathy if it were anything else. But this is no different. So really understanding that, and showing yourself some grace and acknowledging that this is something really difficult to deal with and hard to come to terms with. And that empathy and compassion for oneself is really going to be what helps you on this journey.
Well, we are getting close to being out of time, I think. It's really hard to tell out of my normal time frame. So, audience, if you guys have any questions, please go ahead, and this is your last chance to get them into that chat box. And we'd love to hear what you think about what we've said tonight about boredom, about the TSM process, about habit shifting, about, just giving yourself some kindness, the same kind of kindness you would give to someone else. Any kind of feedback other than obviously the buffering issues. We know that one. But we don't get Danni on camera very often because of the time difference. We're 12 hours different from each other right now. So you have this opportunity. So go ahead and get some last minute questions or comments in there. But what last words do you have for the audience, Danni?
I would just say that this method is life-changing, at least life-saving in some cases, that it does take time. So don't expect a quick fix or for it to be an overnight success, but stay the course, reach out and get the support you need from as many different sources as you need. There's a lot available online thanks to the C3 Foundation. There's Facebook pages that are invaluable with the peer support that they offer. There's coaching available. And we have access to the internet. So there's so much education and resources also available to people to empower themselves. Reach out wherever you need, but stay the course and stay compliant because this does work. And I would just like to offer too that changing this one aspect of your life by addressing your AUD will ultimately have a domino effect on every single other area of your life. And as you begin to address this, every other area will improve. It's impossible for it not to. So this is incredibly life-changing, and just stay with it. Stay with it because it is so worth it.
Thank you so much. And again, guys, if sitting with your thoughts is uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable for everybody. Small steps. And there are definitely plenty of resources and peers out there. Our peer support, because we've got people around the world, those Facebook groups, our forum, it doesn't matter what time of day. You can pop in there and it's likely that someone's around to chat with. So, audience, you guys have been great. You have been a completely different audience for us tonight, which is awesome. We do love you guys. We hope that you have taken some great advice that you can use from this. So please join me in thanking our wonderful guest, Danni L. If you guys can show some love in the chat, that would be great. Hopefully we'll be able to get Danni on again next season with a stable broadband connection so that we don't have the buffering issues. Now, normally, as soon as I'm done with a stream, I start clipping it down and getting it posted all over the place. But with this video, you guys are going to have to wait until after I get back to the office next week, hopefully on Monday, or if you're watching us from Australia, it'll be Tuesday. We'll get this up on our website, on YouTube, Vimeo, Anchor, Spotify, and we'll have it ready for replay so that you guys can watch it, share it, especially if you came in late. Next week, we are going to be back at our normal time of noon Eastern with Bruce Rose from Alcohol Recovery Scotland, and he's going to rejoin our stream to finish our discussion we started a few weeks ago about the Sinclair Method support process. So we went pretty in depth over the first step of the support process with him back on February 11th. If you missed that episode, you might want to go back and watch that. We're going to talk about the second and third steps in the process. And if you found value in this broadcast, we hope you'll hit the donate button in our profile or go to our website and you can make a donation at c3foundation.org/donate. You can follow the channel to get broadcast alerts, and you can subscribe to our channel to go ad-free, which all of you got to go ad-free tonight because I couldn't afford the bandwidth to run the ad on Twitch. So y'all got lucky tonight. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can actually subscribe to our channel for free. If you're on the Sinclair Method and you're looking for more peer support, or you just want to join the C3 Foundation community, we do have groups on Facebook, Discord, and our Options Save Lives forum. And Andy Man is in the chat, and he will field any questions you've got about the TSM meetup group that is a daily Zoom call, and that's all volunteer run. Not by C3 Foundation, but we wholeheartedly support it and love that it's out there. So Andy is the man. Andy Man is the man to talk to for that. And you can reach him directly as well. And I will put a link to the TSM meetup group with the resources for this video when I post it on our website, so that for those of you who have watched, you will have the link easily found. You can also find Danni if you're looking for personal TSM coaching. She is on the Your Sinclair Method coaching page, and you just have, if you're outside of Australia, you just have to make sure that you are aligning your time zone with hers. So that is it for tonight. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Be gentle with yourself and with others, and I will see you again next week right here on Twitch. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jenny.
You've been watching the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous supporters. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org. If you have a question you want answered live on air, to make guest suggestions, or to support the show, let us know. You can reach us through our website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or on Discord. Join us each week as we continue to discuss more ways to help you build a better relationship with alcohol, or to eliminate it completely. Because recovery from alcohol use disorder is not a one-size-fits-all process. Options are available, and options save lives.